Well, I've told you and told you and told you about this false bottom here, and I guess that's because it's in 3 layers, but here it is, all 3 layers, and we're ready to glue it together really. It's been cut a little crudely. It's going to be recut and shaped in a number of different ways. I've made some marks across it here with a black magic marker just so we could quickly line the layers up the way they belong. And we're going to glue the scarfs at the same time as we glue the layers together. So we're gluing 3 scarfs together, and we're going to add some sticks underneath it, probably going across and on top, that we can fasten down through the sticks to hold it nice and steady and spread the load out so that the screws won't pull it down into a point load situation, because we want the bottom of it to be nice and flat. We're also going to fasten it down to the molds here, so you know there's plenty of places here to fasten it together, and we don't have to spread the glue all the way out to the edges because it's going to be tapered back anyhow. So you know, we're just trying to do it as quickly as possible and as neatly as possible, and I'll probably skip some of the priming and different things like that because it's unnecessary. Now, just before we get gluing this thing together, we're going to check out each and every one of these scarfs that we've cut. And we're going to tune them up with a little block plane here. Now, this block plane is really, really sharp, so it removes material very quickly. And the reason why I'm doing this is to check and see how flat they feel. Another reason is to feather them right out to a nice feathered edge so they come right to a point. That way I can stack them up on the boat exactly 5 inches apart, and I won't have a lump in the gluing action up there on the boat. Now, I can test all around. There's a couple spots near the edges of the corners that want some touch up, and I'll go over the whole thing, like I said, but it's very, very quick, maybe a minute on each scarf and we're done. So we're ready to glue them on the boat, and I'm gonna just isolate this glue line or the very edge of this scarf from the mold with a little bit of blue tape so that we don't leak any glue out of that scarf and glue the whole thing to the mold. That's just an isolator, and it's the only place I need it in the whole job right here. We're using TotalBoat 5:1 epoxy resin with the slow hardener here, and we're pumping it with their metering pumps right here. Now, this is a job that's just about borderline as far as pumping it, because we're mixing quite a bit of glue here, but it's taking care of the job. Otherwise, we'd have to mix it in some other manner. I like to pump 1 pump of each one. You wouldn't want to pump like, say, 10 pumps of hardener and then 10 pumps of glue. I'd probably lose count because I have to stomp my feet to count. I can't keep track. So you go back and forth between the 2 pumps, 1 pump of each, and that gives the resin pump time to reach the top. Now, don't be afraid to mix the glue up for quite a while, because the longer you mix it, the better it works. And you got to make sure that the hardener hasn't spread on the side of the bucket, or all the resin's on the side of the bucket and you haven't got the 2 mixed together. And I just be patient a little bit and think about what I'm going to do next. Now, once I've got the glue mixed up to my satisfaction, I'm going to add a little bit of thickener. Now, I paddle it in there and mix that in really, really good, just like I mixed the glue, because I don't want any thick spots or thin spots. And I scrape around the edges and mix it up really, really good. And then I pick it up with the paddle and see if it runs off the end. Now, if it does, it's just not thick enough. Add some more. And what I'm out to do is get the right consistency here. So I'm going to add a little bit in there and mix that in really, really good, just like I mixed the glue, and scrape around the edges and everything and make sure it's all mixed up. And then I'll pick some up with the paddle and see if it runs off the end. If it does, it's just not thick enough. So I'm going to add some more. And like I said, I want that consistency to be a little bit thicker so it's much easier for me to handle it with like a spatula or a toothed trowel. So it makes it easier for me to get it on the scarves without dripping any on the floor or getting it all over the place. It just makes it easier to put it everywhere that I'm going to use it. Okay. We've got our glue mixed up and we're just about ready to glue our first scarf together. Now I'm just paddling a little bit of glue out on there, and with a flat paddle like this, you can't really tell how much you got, so put a little bit extra like so, and then we're going to pick up a toothed trowel. Now the toothed trowel kind of spreads it around and you get the same amount everywhere. See? Very simple to do. And very fast, just like that. I'll put that right in there. I just made this tooth trowel out of a little yellow squeegee, and I cut the teeth in it with a razor knife about 1/8 of an inch apart. It was real simple to do and fast, and as you use them, they wear down a little bit, and you just cut them a little deeper, and it just goes on. But they're very easy to handle. They bend a little bit, and you can pick glue up with them real easy and return it to the pot. They just handle real nice, so that's what I do. Done. All right, we're going to lay our first piece down. Just make the two scarves line up just the way we had it. And get the length exactly the same. Make sure it's hanging over there just right, just like that. And now Joe is going to empty out the pot right on top of the whole thing. Then I'm going to spread that out, and Joe's going to mix another batch. We'll have to mix quite a few batches here to get this whole thing covered, because not only am I putting the glue on this surface on the boat, but I'm spreading glue on the back side of the other pieces as well. So there's quite a bit of mixing to do, but it's not really anything. You'll notice the technique that I'm using here. I'm reaching over to the edge of the plywood with the trowel and pulling the glue towards the middle of the plywood. That way I don't get a big lump of glue near the edge. And once you've got it spread out a little bit, you can actually go the other direction. But I don't need to really get it to the very edge of the plywood, because all of that's going to be cut off again, all 3 layers, all trimmed all at once. Now we're going to go to this piece right here. Unless I'm crazy. No, it's the stern. It's got the notes on it. Yep. It's the stern end. Sorry. And we just carry the pieces over and stack them right up where they belong. I think I even interchanged a couple of the pieces here, a couple of the layers, but none of that matters. They're all identical. It's just another layer. We're going to pay particular attention to the scarves, not only the spreading of the glue, but the positioning on the boat, because we don't want them to sneak up on each other. It would create a lump in that layer of plywood, or be too far away, because then there'd be just like a space in the glue right there. But it's not an emergency situation. We're going to get them right down there just where they belong before we start adding pressure. Again, we're using the slow hardener here with this resin, and it's great because it gives us plenty of time to work the glue. It really changes the speed with which it hardens, and the only thing that you have to do with it is get it out of the pot as soon as you can, because it starts to create heat in the pot. So the big secret with any of this glue, if you don't want it to go off, is once you've mixed it, dig it out of the pot and spread it out on something flat, whether it's what you're trying to glue or just anything flat, and use it from there. So what we do right here, it's the perfect situation, because we can just dig it out of the pot, spread it out on the surface, that kills the heat, and then spread it around with the tooth trowel. Now we're going to continue on mixing and spreading in small batches here. And Joe's doing the mixing, I'm doing the spreading, and it's teamwork, and it's just working out great. Yeah, line up the black magic marker lines. You understand what I'm saying? It's going to come down this way, more like that somewhere. Yeah, like that. That's right. So here's our last piece glued up, and we're going to put it into position just like this and fold it over just like I showed you before, and slide it right up just where it belongs. Line up our little magic marker lines just like that, and that's just about it right there. Now I'm just going to strip my gloves off here, because I don't want to get glue all over my clamps. And I'm going to take a couple of clamps and just give them some real light pressure right here, just so things don't move around on me. Kind of like that. One down here, and I think I'll put one down the other end. Now I'm applying some pieces of wood across the bottom right on top of the molds right here, and screwing them right down into the molds with 3-inch screws. That'll apply quite a bit of pressure, believe me, and the wood spreads the load out, and it just pulls all those glue lines right up tight. So I'm going to put one on top of each mold. I'm also going to add some intermediate pieces in between, quite a few of them really, and some pieces underneath to screw down into, and that really applies pressure all around, as opposed to, like, say, vacuum bagging it or something high-tech like that, which I just don't really have to go into on something as simple as this. Well, I've got all the spring clamps removed from the bottom now. The glue is dry. I removed all the other clamps. I've backed out all the screws that were holding it down to the molds right here that actually serve two purposes, actually, so that the bottom wouldn't move around, as well as to squeeze the bottom together nice and tight. and I had intermediate bars in between, 2 in between each mold. So I've applied quite a bit of pressure everywhere, and I've used the right glue as far as I'm concerned, because I've thickened it up so that it doesn't move around so easy. And the thing about that is that I wouldn't want that much glue that I put in there to displace itself, you know, putting the first pressure on it, because all the glue that was here would end up over here. Well, then I'd have a lump of glue over here, and I'd have a hard time displacing that back, because this is already squeezed down tight. No good. You want a glue that doesn't move around very much. It's been thickened, and it's worked out really well. It's guaranteed to dry because it's catalytic. And the other thing I'd have to say about it is that this plywood is, like I say, a rough grade of plywood. The surface of the plywood is not even flat. Right, so you need to put quite a bit of glue in there, otherwise you'd have voids everywhere and all kinds of problems. And you know, I want a catalytic glue. I want it dry the next day so I can work with it. This is the stuff right here. So I'm going to reach underneath with a pencil and transfer the marks that I've got on the molds at the corners, right there where the bottom planking meets the garbage. Once I've got all of those marked onto the plywood, I'm also going to transfer the centerline marks from the molds onto the plywood. Then I'm going to flip it over and clamp a batten along between those marks down one side. Now you have to be careful here, and a 5-inch clamp does the trick, because the batten kind of wants to roll a little bit like I've showed you before, and nailing it down doesn't really work really well. So I just clamp it down really nice and neat, just like this. Now I'm going to sight the batten, because when I first clamped it down, it was probably a little straight between these 2 clamps right here. So I'm going to just sight down the batten and just give it a little tap on the end, because I do see it straight in between those 2 clamps, and that just filled it right in, straightened it right out perfect, just the way I want it. So I'm ready to draw a line alongside of it. This would be my cut line right here. I'm going to cut just barely outside of this line with a skill saw, but I'm not going to do it freehand. I'm going to put another batten inside and follow the next batten with the saw. Now I've moved my batten over, and I've also moved my piece over towards myself here so that I won't cut the molds with the saw again. I'm just using a little antique circular saw here, and it cuts 1.25 inches away from the side of the saw, so that's why I clamped it down 1.25 inches away. And I'm just going to pick up the saw and taxi along that batten, and it works terrific. It's awful screechy because these little blades make an awful noise when you cut, so you have to have headgear on for this one. As I'm cutting, you'll notice I cut up to 1 clamp at a time, and I remove it, and I try to put that clamp behind the saw as soon as I can, because I don't want that batten moving around. But it's on a curve, so as I remove the clamps, it really doesn't move at all, and it doesn't move even if you put a little pressure from the saw against it because of that curvature. It does take a little time, and it's a little bit tedious, but this is the way I wanted to do it, because I just didn't want to nail the batten down. I know that would be trouble, and I don't want to poke a whole bunch of holes through the batten, so all I could have done was nail alongside of it, and it just wouldn't have worked. The batten would have rolled on me and different things, so this works out great. It keeps the batten twisted down nice and flat, it's nice and fair, and it just works out perfectly. Now, I've got a little marking gauge here I want to show you. It's just a piece of wood, and I've cut this cavity out of it here so it would get around this piece of material here. It's actually very straight on this side, right up here and right to there. Now, what I've done is I made a point out of it here with the bandsaw, and I've got a couple little pencil lines on it here. And what I'm going to do is place it on the mold right here. I'm going to lay it down nice and flat, and basically what this thing is to do is to transfer this angle right here on the mold up onto the bottom. Now I have to be kind of careful because I need to slide it down until this connects up with the plywood. So it's like right there. But if I went any further, what would happen would be it would start to create a gap between the mold and the marking gauge right in here. So what I'm going to do again is slide it back up till it contacts the mold, slide it down until it contacts the plywood, like so, and make a pencil mark right there where I've got the pencil mark on the gauge. So like I say, that's going to be a line that I'm going to draw around here. It's just a control line so I don't plane past it when I plane this off right here. That's just one of my control lines. So I'm going to place it on the same exact way. This particular mold has got a bevel on it, so I'm going to lean it over so that it contacts the mold properly, and I'm going to bring it downhill, and I'm going to mark it right there. So that is, again, where I'm going to put my line to plane to. I'm also putting a black magic marker line along the bottom edge there. Now I have to work at that a little bit and get it on there nice and black, because as I plane it, that starts disappearing, and I'll get it down until it's just a nice little thin line, and I want it to be nice and dark. Now that's a control line, just like the pencil line is on the top, and as I plane it, I have to be careful not to plane the whole black line away at any time. I know that I've changed the shape of it then. Now, when I get started with the plane, I just kind of start off a little light and then adjust it in until I'm pleased with how much it's cutting at one time in one stroke. And then what I'll do is take that corner off a little bit. It starts teetering around a little bit on the corner, but you know, as I get a little wider surface, that kind of goes away. Now, we're progressive bevel planing here. This isn't on a flat surface, it's a twisted surface right here. So I'll concentrate along the top edge a little bit and disregard the bottom, because I know I've got a little leeway yet, and then I'll shift over and concentrate on the bottom, and then I'll kind of try to flatten it out a little bit. And sometimes I have to hold the planer on kind of a diagonal to the surface, because like I say, the surface isn't flat, but the bottom of the planer is, and you're trying to get the drum or the blades of the planer to contact the surface. That's how you know you're doing a nice flat job on it. Now, it's a little tricky to do, but it's not a lot of effort. It happens really easy. The planer's doing all the work. All I'm doing is pushing it back and forth here. This thing really accomplishes a lot of work. I just don't know where I would be without a planer like this right here. This is the tool right here. Now I'll continue working out in front of myself a little bit, knocking that edge off as I go, and using the wider surface behind me as a platform to get started from. That's basically what I'm doing. I'm using it for a shooting platform, you know, with the work I've already done. And it makes it a little bit easier, and you just go around in a progression and you work your way down. Now you can see that this electric planer is really moving some material. There's just no way in the world that any kind of hand planer would do anything that even resembles this, and the surface would be moving all over the place. So this thing just makes you feel like you're like incredibly powerful, and with it in your hands you are. So you can do things you could never have imagined before in woodwork, and how you can go about it. So this thing really, really pleases me, and I can tell you for sure that anybody that masters the technique of using one of these things will be happy they did. I've got most all the material removed now. I'm very close to where I want to be, but what I'm going to do is back off on the adjustment of the planer so it's not eating so much at one time. And it's amazing because you can back that thing off a couple of clicks and it really responds. You can tell that you're not cutting off anywhere near as much. Another back off, another click, and it's hardly eating anything, and you have to almost press on it to get it to do any work. And you can sneak right up and literally take half the pencil line away and almost all the black magic marker line, and not really even have to touch it up at all. And as you swish back and forth with that planer, you get to feel if there's any lumps in that progression or anything like that. It's really something to have that planer between you and your work and be able to feel your work and the surface beneath it, you know, having the planer in your hands at the same time. That pretty much does it for the electric planing. I'm just going to pick up a little block plane and swish around with it a little bit just to see how it feels. If I got any lumps or any spots I missed or something, make sure it grades out nice and flat. And just finish the job here. Now maybe I couldn't have removed all that material with the hand plane, but I can sure use the hand plane to tune it up, give it that final tune up and get the feel for it, and just check it out visually as I go along. And I can actually tell by the sound of it whether it's removing material or it isn't, and it just all works together to just create a very, very nice finished surface. So that completes the planing of our false bottom, and I'm just going to dust it off here a little tiny bit to show it to you. And geez, it was fun doing that. I enjoy doing that kind of work right there a lot. I like physical work, so it really fits the bill for me right there. But let's just get it swept off here a little bit, and I'm going to explain a few more things to you about this false bottom. Now, it's got a number of uses. Like I had said before, it acts like a chine log right in here when I'm going to connect the bottom to the sides and glue them together. But the other thing I'm going to do to this false bottom is actually cut slots in it right here with a router to accept the framing. The frame is just going to travel right through that false bottom and join the bottom right up in here. And this is the framing right here. This is high density polyethylene. And there's nothing like it. This stuff is the strongest stuff known to man, although it flexes like this. So there's no break in it, that's for sure. Look at this. There's no break in it. So this stuff is the best stuff I've ever used, and it's going in. So stick with us.